Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast. My name is Bryan Hornung. I'm here with Reginald, Andre, and Randy Bryan. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing great, man. It's still morning down here in Texas, so we're still not afternoon. It's going to be a hot day down here, actually. It's pretty awesome.
Doing good over here. It's 80 degrees and sunny.
Jesus. I wish I knew what that was like. So welcome to the show where we break things down for cybersecurity to a business level so everybody understands. A show's really not for techs. It's more for the business person, employees. You know, we talk about things like what you should have in your tool chest as an employee. So you're on the front lines of this whole digital world that we live in, and working in front of that computer all day, a lot of things can trip you up and foul you up to lead to a ransomware attack or, just a cyber attacks. And, we try to break things down so everybody understands it. And, we do this every week. We don't get paid. So the fee for the show is pretty simple. Share our stuff. If you like what we're doing, if you're entertained, if you are educated, if we change your perspective or maybe opened your eyes to something you've never heard before, share a show out. It's simple. Go to your favorite podcasting platform, hit the little share button, even leave a comment while you're there. That would be awesome. Give us a 5-star review if you think we're worthy. And that's simple. So share the show. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because today we're going to talk about 2022 predictions for cybersecurity and where the world's going in the next 12, 13 months. We got a new year coming upon us, and why not lay it out for everybody as to what we as cybersecurity experts think is going to happen maybe in our industry and other industries. Like I can think of cyber insurance being a big topic for 2022 as cyber insurers try to figure out how to make money with the product in the face of massive ransomware demand payments and associated costs with cyber attacks. And we're going to just get into a lot of different things on what businesses should be looking out for in 2022. So that's my spiel. That's my opening. Guys, have anything you want to add before we dive into it?
Just glad to be here today. There's going to be a lot of good topics that are relevant for small and medium-sized businesses, and also for people just looking to stay safe out there. So looking forward to today's talks.
Yes, sir. Randy, we good?
Let's dive in.
Andre?
Let's dive in. Yep.
All right, sweet. So I think I'm going to start off the first prediction with Andre. So I think the way we're going to do this, we're just going to work around and each give a prediction, and that'll pretty much be the show. But we're going to dive into each of these predictions a little bit. So Andre, what's your first prediction? What's going to happen in 2022? You got your crystal ball ready?
I was actually looking for it. I think I left it in the other room.
Right.
So the first prediction I have is that there's going to be more government regulation, and specifically with government contractors, and then secondly in the private sector.
I agree. I think that's definitely something that's coming to fruition very shortly. I don't think we're going to get through 2022 without seeing some additional federal rules in place. Hopefully they don't come through. They actually come through as laws and not executive orders or anything like that. But I could see a major cyber attack leading to an executive order without it going through the proper channels of our government. And I definitely, without a doubt, think some state laws are coming. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, the government's going to force private businesses, to do cybersecurity. And if you don't think it's possible, just look at what they're doing with COVID vaccinations and how they're forcing private businesses to do that. And it's just going to translate over into cybersecurity when that becomes, a deep enough problem. Your thoughts, Mr. Bryan?
It's definitely so excuse my French, it's kind of a crap show out there right now, because we've got certain branches of the government, getting hacked and using unsecured servers and all this stuff we've talked about the past several weeks. In the middle of that, there's this growing noise of legislators talking about these bills that they're talking about, or these bills that they're introducing. I think it's just a matter of time. So I think that's a right-on prediction. We're going to see more and more government regulation in this area. I would stress, though, this is not something we can wait on the government to protect us over. That we need to be proactive on our own and take responsibility for our own security.
I agree. Well said. Now, one of the things that I hear a lot about, and I want to bring up for discussion with you guys, is our own industry and the regulation that could be coming down the pike for the IT consulting, IT services business. Let's just put it that way, right? And that encompasses whether you call your company, a computer repair shop, whether you call your company a managed service provider, an IT consultant, a managed security service provider, a cybersecurity company. I don't think the laws are going to differentiate, too much between all those different types of businesses that we're aware of within the industry. I think it's going to cover a large blanket of the industry, and basically it's just going to be like the IT services regulation. Don't know where it's going to come from, quite frankly. It feels like a state move to me at a lot of different levels. But what are your thoughts on the regulation of our industry? Do you think it's needed, well past due? We'll start with Andre. We'll go over to Randy.
Yeah, it's well past due. But if the government can't even get the private sector and its own, their ducks in a row, I think it's going to be more on the cyber insurance that's going to put the pressure on their client to then put the pressure on us to make sure that we're doing XYZ for the client.
So you don't see government stepping in and regulating this industry like they do maybe doctors or CPAs or anything like that? You don't see that happening in 2022?
How slow they've been moving, I would see them first working on the private and then coming after us after.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, and that gets into like like a law license, physician's license, licensing, and all that stuff. And I am a little surprised that that's never happened in our industry. I could see it happening though. Although, from a market standpoint, sometimes the licensing works more to keep people out more than to protect the consumer. I know, don't at me on that. That's controversial, but I believe it has that effect sometimes. But on the other hand, we probably do need some of that because, right now, just any old chuck in a truck can basically just say, hey, I'm a cybersecurity guy, and just start doing whatever. And businesses might think they're protected when they really aren't. So there's definitely a need there and a place for it.
Yeah, I personally think that the way this, off just high level talking of how we need to handle this is from a advertising or marketing standpoint, there definitely needs to be a line drawn in the sand on whether or not you just do infrastructure and or you do security. And then I think it also needs to be known publicly whether or not, just because we know what's going on in the industry, whether or not you're doing that security service internally with your own staff or you're just farming it out and using another company. And there's no issue with either of those, but I think like truth in lending is out there in the mortgage industry. There has to be some kind of truth or wall or some kind of repercussion if a company goes out there and says they're doing X and they're really doing Y. If they're out there saying like these are our people, and a company hires them under the thought that they have a full team of staff, of employees in a building somewhere that are security experts, when the reality is they're just using some third-party company to carry out these services. think that needs to be disclosed at some point. And then on the flip side of that, if you're not going to engage in those types of services and security, you should have to advertise that. And if you kind of engage in security, then that puts your company at risk, because you can easily be an MSP and say, we don't do security. We just make sure that your stuff runs, right? And that it works when you come in. But we're not looking at this from the lens of protecting you from hackers and cyber criminals. I think if you're upfront about that and you advertise yourself that way, you're not going to enter in any hot water, and it could potentially help with your, as you guys mentioned, with cybersecurity or cyber insurance premiums and things like that. But if you're going to be a security company and you're going to say, hey, we do security, I believe that you need to have some kind of registration or license behind that tells the consumer that this company's vetted and they actually do this stuff, like they've been audited or something along those lines. So anything you guys want to add to that?
Nope, we're good.
Good. All right, Randy, what's your prediction?
Well, my prediction / trend for 2022 is something we already know about. We've already mentioned it like 4 times in our first 10 minutes of our podcast. And that is the cybersecurity insurance and the changing game of that, and how hard it's going to be to either get it or keep it. And the reason I put this, because like the 3 of us already know this, because we've been talking about it for going on years. We've been talking about this, that it's coming. But just the other night, I was at a Christmas party for a networking group I'm in, and just talking to a couple other business owners, like they were kind of like, it was kind of an eye opener for them. So I think for most people out there, they don't see this coming. But bottom line is, we're going to start seeing more demand from the cyber security insurance companies, where basically the companies that are wanting to get insured are going to have to go on to full stack cybersecurity. No longer is it like back like 2 years ago, to get cybersecurity insurance, the questions were basically, do you have antivirus and do you have a firewall? And now the questions, like I just filled out one recently, it was probably 20 questions, I think, maybe 10. But basically, yeah, do you have antivirus? Do you have firewall? Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have privilege elevation monitoring? Like boom, 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 on down the list. All these things that the 3 of us talk about all the time, they're starting to demand. And then some companies are just straight up just pulling the rug out, and they're saying, we're not going to do this industry anymore, or we're not going to do cybersecurity insurance at all. So we're just facing, I have 5 or 6 clients that have cyber insurance that have been notified that their companies are just getting out and they're not even doing it anymore. So we're going to be seeing that. That's a huge thing that's going to be coming big time in 2022.
Yep, I agree. Andre.
They're losing money. The insurance companies are losing money, and now they're finally reacting to this, and they're seeing the business model of someone coming in and stealing the data and then paying to get the data back is not profitable. So yeah, definitely see that happening, where they're going to essentially deny and not just take the money and use their algorithms and statistics to have the probability. They're now saying we're out unless you do this checklist.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the other issue is it's still a checklist. There's nobody verifying, or the insurance companies haven't figured out that, number one, we've known for a long time in this industry, it's far better to work as a team than it is to work against each other. And I don't think the IT industry and the cyber insurance industry are there yet. And I'll even go a step further and, off topic a little bit, but I would even say that the CPA industry with their SOC 2 and their AI CPA, that stuff is they need to work together with IT to make things in that area work. But the reality of it is we're still on the honor system. We're still basically saying, are you doing these things? Here's an Excel spreadsheet, or here's a form, fill it out. We're still on the honor system, and we have the technology to just go in and not use the honor system. We can quickly scan, networks and devices to tell people like insurance companies exactly what this company is doing and what their risk is. And the insurance companies are hesitant to go there with IT companies, maybe because they don't understand it, or maybe because they realize that this is just a lost leader for them in terms of an insurance product. But I can tell you one thing's for sure. It's already happening in 2021, and it's going to happen through 2022, where coverage premiums are going to go up. Coverages for things like ransomware payments are going to go down. I'm already seeing these things being capped at 25,000. Now, you may think that, that'll just get the cyber criminals to get their demands to come down to, instead of millions, hundreds, if not tens of thousands. It's not going to work like that. And when people start to think that banning crypto payments is going to be another thing that's going to slow these guys down, it's not going to slow them down. They're going to figure out other ways to get paid. And I'm going to talk about one of those ways a little bit later with one of my predictions. But anything you guys want to add to that? I think that's a great point, Randy. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I know that there's HIPAA compliancy groups. I mean, I know there's a company called that, but I'm talking about generic. There's HIPAA compliancy groups that actually run scans on your network to verify that you literally are HIPAA compliant before they give you, that seal. So that's the technology's there for that. And then also when you fill out those check marks, yes, it's the honor system, but at the bottom, it also says when you sign here, it says, I am certifying that what I filled out above was true. And they say, if you lie on any of these, we're not going to pay your insurance premium. Right. I mean, we're not going to pay your insurance claim. So yes, it is on the honor system. And there are check boxes and all that. But bottom line is, if you get a claim and you didn't do those things, they're not going to pay. So I think that we're probably going to see, like you said, though, there is the ability out there now to verify those things. And I think we're going to see that. Or they might require a certain stack.
I hope we see that. I'm not as hopeful as you are or confident as you are that that's going to come to fruition. I honestly think that before we see that day, we'll see these insurance companies kill the product and not even offer it as a thing anymore.
Even when I in the green room, we were talking about me completing a Securities Exchange Commission report for one of our wealth management clients. And speaking again on the honor system, the guys that were asking the questions didn't know IT. And they were just looking at the writings and, okay, that's what you have. Great. Okay, thank you. And that was it. It wasn't anybody saying, let me come into the system, give me a screenshot or anything like that. So even the government's on that honor system, at least for this particular, regular.
100%. And you a lot of people who listen to this podcast, who are our colleagues in this industry, were all hyped up about CMMC for the longest time. And, they just got their bubble burst when the government basically came out and said, well, we're going to go from 5 levels to 3 levels. And the first 2 levels are going to self-certify now. And that was the whole point of going into CMMC, is there would be no self-certification going on. But then they realized what it would take to audit all these companies, and really how small these companies are that provide, products to the military. Some of these companies are 10, 20 employees, and that's it. And their only customer is the federal government through maybe some kind of prime contract or some other major defense contractor. And when you're talking companies this small, they're not spending the kind of money that CMMC was requiring them to spend. So, everybody was all up in arms. And fast forward, after 2 years of kind of going back and forth on what this thing was going to look like, they recently came out and said, here's what it's going to look like. And it was a big disappointment to our people in our industry who were moving in that direction to possibly that be like a big piece of their core function of their company. And now they have to kind of change gears because of these decisions that were made, all going back to your point, Andre, which is, we're just still doing box checking. And I think the three of us agree that the box checking doesn't work. That's what we've been doing since the beginning of time. And that's why we see things like Colonial Pipeline and JB Meat get hacked, because, they're kind of doing cybersecurity, but they're really not, right? So anything else we want to add to that? Cool. Good one. Good one. So I'm going to throw my first one in. And my first prediction is we're going to see a lot of attacks around crypto exchanges and the new thing, NFTs. I'm not going to go into what they are, but these are places where cyber criminals know where there's money. So these are now becoming the digital banks of the internet, and they're being adopted at a very mainstream level today. And that's only going to increase in 2022. And this is where people are going to keep a significant portion of maybe their savings, where they traditionally might have put it in a savings account. People are starting to change the way they look at money and how they handle their money. And they're not keeping them in savings accounts. They're moving them into more, aggressive investments, or maybe they're speculating with things like NFTs. And cyber criminals know this money sitting out there, billions and billions and billions of dollars of it in these various, crypto coins and NFTs. And I think that a lot of new technology is going to come out in 2022 that's not going to be secured the way that it needs to. And we're going to see both front-end hacks, meaning your accounts were compromised, you didn't have 2FA turned on, somebody was able to take over your wallet and, drain your account. And we're also going to see, supply chain types of attacks where these companies are going to be hacked through their own platform, through no fault of the end user, and your money is going to disappear that way. So be on the lookout for it. Make sure you're doing everything that you can. And before you decide to join, a particular exchange, make sure you do a little bit of research into how they secure things or where their servers are. Because a lot of these coins and a lot of the NFTs, you're only going to be able to buy them in certain places. And if those places become targets, you're potentially going to, have a really bad investment through no fault of your own. So I don't know how much you guys know about this stuff, but it's something that I've been looking at and I'm very interested in. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I think that's going to be a big thing for 2022.
Yeah. Two things on that is, A, it's not regulated. So, and B, there's no government like a FDIC that's basically going to guarantee money. So, right. People are going to lose their shirts. And like you said, this is their investment. Now, the interesting thing, though, is when I Googled, the average age of an NFT buyer is 38 years old. So it's the younger market, which one would think that, they know about MFA. They know about what to look for in the scams, but it's not going to. You would just think the younger.
In our world, yes. But I just met a bunch of dudes in the entertainment industry who had no clue how to put MFA on their Instagram and why they needed it. And these are all guys who, are on the cusp, or if not already have, the blue check mark, they're considered influencers. And those are the types of accounts criminals want. They want influencer types of accounts because you can use that influencer's trust to then exploit that audience, with a bad link or something like that, if you're able to get control of their accounts. So anything you want to add to that, Randy, before we move on? Go ahead.
Just kind of underline what you already said. You said it like the second sentence out of your mouth. Bottom line is, you mentioned the money, and the bottom line is wherever there's money that can be, criminalized, can be stolen or whatever, you're going to see the cyber criminals are going to move towards it. And then you add in what Andre said about it being unregulated. It's not insured. So there's a higher risk from both of those. One thing we haven't really heard a lot of is, I wonder if we're going to see attacks. This is just a question. I don't even know if it's not even really a prediction, but if the criminals could figure out how to steal a small amount, people probably wouldn't even notice it. You know what I mean?
I'm going to talk about that later.
Okay. All right. Then I'll move on.
I'm going to talk about that later. So okay. Is that my next one, or is that?
I don't want to steal your thunder.
Let me see where I have that listed. that's my third topic, right?
We may cover it next week, or depending on time, right?
Yeah, we'll see. But we'll get to it. It's one of my topics. But all right, cool. So real quick, Ruben Berger. I guess this is around our government topic, but Ruben chimed in here and said, I would suggest that government should enforce IT companies to be compliant in a sense of using only trusted or compliant AV solutions and firewalls. This will force IT companies to use proper security measures. Right. So he's making a great point. I've actually suggested this on a multiple times in the last 6 to 8 months. Andre, you mentioned this in the green room when we talked. This is that whole idea of where we need to have some kind of entity stood up that regulates IT products and services or software, right? If you're putting these things in place as security products, right, firewalls and AV, who's vetting these companies to say that their stuff is actually secure, right? And I think having an independent third party handle that, kind of like the NTSB or kind of like UL does for electric products. I've mentioned this before on the podcast. That's kind of what I think Ruben's talking about here. It's like, why should the onus of these products that we need, the safety of these products, think of like your car, if your car falls apart or you have a lemon because of manufacturer defects, the government's going to make the manufacturer handle that problem, not put that onus on the buyer of the vehicle. And right now in the IT world, that's where we live in, right? If we buy something from Microsoft or we buy something from Cisco and that has a security problem, we're the ones that have to deal with fixing it. We're the ones that have to deal with the workarounds. We're the ones that have to put effort into securing those devices until there's a longer term fix. And sometimes we have to replace the devices 100%. Which is really annoying because then you have to go into a client where you made a recommendation around a product and you're like, I got to take this out because, it's a piece of crap. And I told you it wasn't. So that's really annoying. So real quick, you guys agree with this comment or I think he hit the nail on the head. We need this, right? And
right.
My guess would be Ruben's probably in our industry, but I don't know Ruben. So but that's where things need to be at.
It's, there's a big lag right now. Obviously, the government is not caught up, and you have a lot of new companies coming. They're flooding into this area. Billions of dollars in venture capital are flooding into cybersecurity, where like all three of us have literally probably been on a Zoom call with a CEO of one of these companies asking them what their cybersecurity practices are to make sure we're having to vet companies personally these days because they're so new, they're so small. This is such a new space for this. Yeah, I think it's right on. If we had a way that we could know that these certain companies are, sticking to certain standards would really help.
Good point. So, Andre, second prediction for 2022.
Every service without multi-factor authentication, if you don't have that, it's going to get hacked.
That's a good point, right? So MFA needs to be the thing, I guess, along with the password manager, right?
Right.
You don't want to be using the same password all over the place. So you make it easy for a cyber criminal to take over all your accounts. Excuse me. But using a password manager in conjunction with MFA, I think is 1 and 2 where you start, right? That's where it all begins for most individuals, not even companies. Companies should be investing in that stuff and giving it to all their employees and training them on how to use those products and what proper password hygiene is and how to use MFA properly and how to at least be aware when you log into something, if it doesn't challenge you with a code or some way to log in, bring that to somebody's attention. So maybe, either they can help you figure out how to get that turned on, or maybe it's time to reach out to the service that you're using and tell them like, hey, get with the times and put multi-factor on this. So, I at least know I'm protected if somebody gets my username or password for this website or, thing that I have to log into. Randy.
Yes.
Thoughts? This isn't class. I'm not asking you.
I mean, I think it goes. What he said is so true, and it just goes without saying. You've got to get on multi-factor. Literally, what I was thinking though was actually kind of zoning off, because I was thinking like we haven't really talked about like what is multi-factor. How do I get it turned on, and how do I use it? What are some apps that we can use for that? What are some apps that are well known out there, maybe, that are for that? Password hygiene. Are there any browsers that we could use that would like save our passwords and test them all and make sure that none of them have been leaked out there?
So here's what I'll propose.
Bottom line is yes to what he said.
Here's what I propose. It's an excellent prediction, but to your point, why don't we go through? It's going to seem very basic to a lot of our friends in the industry, but why don't we go through what you just said? Show them on the screen password managers and talk about it, and talk about the details and the importance, and securing your social media accounts and your bank accounts with MFA, and look at the different options for MFA and why one might be better than the other. I think that would be a good show we could knock out in like 30-40 minutes, of showing people that kind of stuff.
A lot of good content.
Yeah. So we'll mark that down for next week. Nice.
Or the week after, if we don't finish today's.
Yeah, we'll finish today's. We're good. We're 30 minutes. We got 15 minutes. So we're going to have to, we all got basically one each. I'm going to get through mine quickly. What do you got, Randy? What's your prediction?
My prediction is more, like I said, or on my other one, it's more of a trend that we already know about, but I think we're going to see a high growth in the cybercrime as a service. I think that where there's money, it's going to draw people, like we already said, it's going to draw the criminals into that. And then the ones that have a business mind are going to say, how can we scale this? How can we make more money off of this? And one way from both like the big players in the cyber criminal arena, if they can roll out cybercrime as a service, basically what it is, where they can sell like a software subscription that allows like a small time criminal to play in the big fields and to play, in the big time. And they buy the subscription, they can install it, run it, get it on computers that they have access to. And then the cybercrime as a service handles all of that big picture stuff. And so it's a way for them to scale. And I think we're going to see it really ramp up in 2022.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point. And just to kind of split the weeds here a little bit of what you said, just think of this whole world that we live in is like, as more people get into it, both on the good side and the bad side, we are moving away from kind of like that person who existed maybe in the 90s and the early 2000s, that jack of all trades in technology who kind of knew everything. A lot of these cyber criminals were those guys, right? They knew how to code. They knew how to, set up networks and configure them and find weaknesses in them. It was kind of like they knew a little bit of everything, but they weren't necessarily experts at one thing, which means that it might take you longer to break into something. It might be a lot of trial and error. For you to exploit maybe an application inside of the network using programming skills might take a little bit longer because you're just not like an expert with it. You know your way around, and you're basically kind of teaching yourself as you're exploiting. And we're evolving into where people who are very good at networks, people who are very good at coding a specific language are being brought in, and these guys are working together so they can strike quicker. They can be more effective when they do strike. And that's the way that these guys are making more money, because now it's no different than like when I think about having work done on my house. I can throw up wallboard and spackle and paint, but it's going to take me 2 months because I'm going to be really slow. It's probably not going to look as professional. And it's the same thing with these guys when they get in. If they don't really know what they're doing, they could trip something up to where the network administrators or the people responsible for security are tipped off to something, right? And you want to go undetected, but you're not really that good, and now you're detected, and now you got to start over, or you're kicked out of the network, and they found you, or what have you. If I think about it, if I hire a guy who's an expert in drywall and spackling and all that stuff, he's not even in my house for a half a day, and it looks amazing, right? And that's the kind of perspective that we're talking about. It's either somebody that can get in there quick, get the job done, right, and he gets paid a little bit, as an affiliate. And then, the guys who deploy the ransomware are kind of calling the shots right now. That's kind of how it's laid out. The guys that can deploy the ransomware and encrypt the files kind of sit at the top, and they're using all these subcontractors to, get network access, send out spam emails to trick your employees, call your employees, all the different things that we talked about a few weeks ago for how they're going to get into your network. Is really how all this stuff goes down when you're talking about cybercrime as a service, which is a great prediction, because I think it's just going to go way up this year, and make the end result of that is going to be way more effective cyber attacks. So, Andre?
Let me make sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So an interesting thing is that 85% of small businesses owners, they believe that their company is safe from hackers, viruses, malware, data breach. But at the same time, cybercrime has become the number 2 illegal or trade industry. Excuse me. So my point is, employers and owners think that their networks are safe, but at the same time, cybercrime is becoming and has become bigger than the drug industry. Mm-hmm. So going back to that prediction, it's going to be spot on where, we're going to see way, way more organized crime.
100%. Yep. So good. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. And the next one, my prediction is, and we're already seeing this, I don't know how much of a prediction it is, but I think when we look back, we're going to see 2021 and into 2022 as a turning point or a pivot by criminals to move away from kind of the old way of infecting networks, which is basically like, let me see if I can get, spam this email address database that I have. Maybe they have a database for a specific company, and they just do one company, but they're spraying it out to maybe thousands or tens of thousands of employees at that company. But spamming and just trying to get as much spam or email through with a malicious attachment or a malicious link has been really the way that a lot of companies have been hacked in the past. And I believe moving into 2022, we're going to hear less of, hey, spam was the way they got in, and more of it was a vishing attack or a schmishing attack, where somebody at the company was targeted either individually or the company was targeted as a whole in order to exploit maybe the CEO or the finance department. But I think these cyber criminals are instead of getting in and getting ransomware as quickly as possible, it's more or less like, let's get in, let's see what we have here, and then trying to figure out if it's even worth doing a cyber attack against the company. Because sometimes they might get into a really small network and say, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. We're not going to get much out of this company. Let's just move on to something else. Even though they successfully breached your network and could deploy ransomware, they just decided not to because, it was going to be more hassle for them for the kind of money that they would get out of the company. So I think, they're going to identify the bigger companies. They're going to go after the bigger companies. And quite frankly, bigger companies are probably easier targets because you have thousands and thousands of employees that could potentially have like a credential, exposed on the dark web or something like that versus, a 10-person company. So your risk surface is increased for a bigger company. And I think that these types of attacks are going to happen against bigger companies because it's hard to track down, especially when they have legitimate credentials that they have, at their disposal. So thoughts on that, guys?
The only thing that I don't like about that is the fact that you're not going to have these smaller companies say, what are they going to come after me for? I'm too small for them.
Well, they're always going to be a target, right?
Right.
But the reality of it is unless you have a cyber insurance in place and you're not a very profitable company,
there's no
if
money.
You don't have money in the bank to give to these guys, unless you can negotiate that away. If they decide to hit you, the issue becomes is that you're probably just not going to get your files back. Right. It's not going to be a matter unless you're willing to pay or can pay. If you're not able to pay, you're not going to get your files back. I'm not saying you're not going to get hit less. It's just that why would the cyber criminal go through the effort of doing this when they know their chances of getting paid are very low?
Got it.
Right. Yeah. So like I said, they're pivoting away from that because they've infected companies before and not gotten paid. Where the business owner's like, I don't care, I'm just not paying you, and I'll pull from backups, or I'll just limp along if I can and run my business and know that I lost all my data from the past, which I've seen happen. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, like, these cyber criminals, before they make a hit, they're going to look at, who they're attacking before they decide to do the attack. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get hit with ransomware. You could get hit with something else, and I'll talk about that in my next prediction. So, Randy.
Just to go off of that, we've talked in the last couple of weeks, especially of let's just say company X gets hacked. And then the bad actors use email from company X to infiltrate and target, like you're saying, specifically to target company Y, because they know that they can take those emails from that company that are going to make it through all the spam filters. And if they send it from there, then they can infiltrate company Y. So I think it's a good prediction. I think we are going to see more and more of it. I think that at the same time, with the cybercrime as a service, maybe some of that stuff might be still more on the spammy side, but you're right on. I think more targeted.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you right now, my friends in the real estate, mortgage, and title business, you need to listen up, because your industry is the most, by far, industry that I see subject to these more targeted types of attacks. Where they're researching your buyer, they know the transaction, they know all the parties involved, and it's just a matter of sending it from the right email account and changing the account number and routing number to where somebody's house payment goes to a cyber criminal instead of going to the seller or the mortgage company for the seller. And we see this kind of stuff happening constantly. And that's not a malware attack or anything like that. That's email accounts being hijacked and being taken over. And that's how those things go down. So we're at the 43-minute mark. I don't want to make these too long. So let's try to keep our last round of predictions to 2 minutes. And then we should wrap up here in about 5-6 minutes. So cool. So Randy, what's your last and final prediction for 2022?
I'm going to pull a little pivot from one we talked about in the green room to just based on our conversation. This is kind of a no-brainer, but it's a trend. But we're going to see more people forced to spend more money on cybersecurity, because with insurance getting harder to get, you can't just rely on that as a fallback. People have and are continuing to be very resistant to spending money on top of their regular quote unquote IT budget to also spend money on cybersecurity. But I feel like the environment, what's going on, everything around us, the government is going to push us where we're going to have to spend more money. I'm talking 1 to 3% of gross revenue on cybersecurity on top of whatever you're spending on IT. So that's my prediction for 2022.
You hope it goes that way. I don't know how they're going to enforce. I don't know how they're going to enforce any of that, but go ahead.
I'm not saying it's enforced. I'm saying that the whatever is going to push us towards that. So
whatever
the everything,
the forces of the market, or
the market, insurance, lack of insurance,
Well, that's the
government
market.
regulations.
The market. It means your customers, the places you get money, or the things that are going to keep you in business is the market. And if they're forcing you, and I don't know. Here's a question for you based on your prediction: Does the actual victims of cyber attacks force this, meaning grassroots type of bottom up approach where the people's information that's being basically bought and sold by cyber criminals and given up by poor cybersecurity practices of businesses, do people rise up and start forcing businesses to do cybersecurity the right way?
I mean, I would say that's part of the many pressures on this. MANY, part of the multiple pressures on this, like specifically, like you said real estate. If they're dealing with a company that's constantly getting hacked and constantly, one company's being sent, fake, ACH requests and things like that, that would get annoying. That's the market. The market would say, hey, let's don't do business with these people. Let's find somebody that's not constantly getting hacked. But then, yes, I think the victims of cyber crime and cyber leaks, I think that's going to cause more and more pressures to also be put on businesses to be more cyber secure. Like, I can think of several companies I'm literally not doing business right now with as a consumer because they have sucky cyber security practices in place.
And you think that's just awareness, right? Because you're in this industry.
I'm aware, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably your average bloke's not making those decisions, but
hopefully we'll see the day when the average bloke is, in tune to it. But all right, so Andre, what's your final prediction for 2022?
My final one, let me pull it up here. So it's going to be that attackers are going to go more after the work from home user. You have these
more than they are now.
Well, it's going to happen even more. Because you have people working from home, and a typical setup is still remote desktop connection and VPN. And obviously, you have your kids at home. You have other computers on the network, and it's going to be a combination of going after those computers to then get into the corporate computer when they scan the network. We've talked about it in the podcast with IoT devices, which are your web cameras as far as for security systems, your refrigerator, all of these devices that are going to be talking to a corporate computer, and laterally it's going to move and it's going to spread that way.
I agree 100%. And, it's, Randy, you have anything you want to add to that? I see you muted on me there.
No, I didn't.
All right. I mean, it's one of those things where, it's got to be businesses and everybody need to do more to separate the home environment from the corporate environment, right? The home office or the home has become an extension of the corporate office, and really starting to look at that from how do we segregate this, or how do we make these entry points way more secure? I know a lot of companies that have VPN and they don't have two-factor on the VPN. Like, that's quite frankly, that's heart-stopping and frightening to me when I talk to somebody and I ask them, like, hey, when you log into your VPN, you just have to type in a password and click connect, and most of the time it's yes.
And that's really bad because, if you wanted to protect your house, you wouldn't want to give criminals like access to cameras inside your house 24/7. If
Right.
A criminal can VPN into your network, you're basically allowing them at their leisure just to monitor the whole thing, and just there's no time pressure or anything.
Yeah.
They just get in there and they're just going to poke around and see everything. Yeah, I mean, the only point I would add to all of this is just we've got to treat each endpoint, whether it's in the office or whether it's at home. We have to treat each endpoint like there are bad actors already there, already trying to go through stuff. And you have to set them up with a different stack than we would have done 5 years ago, to make sure that no matter where they are, they're going to be secure. If they go to a coffee shop, they'd be secure. So that's my 2 cents.
They're never secure in a Wi-Fi coffee shop.
Yeah, no.
It's never.
They're more secure than anybody in that coffee shop.
Seriously, though, if anybody connects to a Wi-Fi network at anywhere and you think that you're secure, I'll do a video and show you guys how easy it is to hack a Wi-Fi network, and just intercept the traffic that's going through the air. The most secure way is through that wire that connects through the wall. If you're using Wi-Fi and you're doing sensitive things like banking and things like that, you're taking a risk every time you do it over Wi-Fi, and even over 5G, you're taking a risk. So it's not an exploit, it's not a hack, it's just the nature of the technology. You try to use things like encryption and security to protect against that stuff, but those things can be broken, or if they're not configured correctly, they can be circumvented. So I'll just
treat the wire connection and the office connection like you're in a coffee shop. I mean,
exactly.
Where you're treating it like you're in a active, an environment that is dangerous.
Yep.
And treat each endpoint like it already is in that, and then build your stack from that.
All right, good one. Last one, mine. So Randy, you mentioned earlier in the show, if they could just figure out a way to take a little bit off. And this is why I held it to the last one, because I think it's going to be a big deal this year, because we're not seeing a lot of it. But again, going back to my point earlier with the mainstream adoption, which we are there. Cryptocurrency, NFTs are here to stay. They're going to be here for a while, if not forever. Don't really know where it's going to go, but right now it's a thing. There's market cap. It's its own basic economy right now. And cyber criminals know how to make money using cryptocurrency. Not only will they attack the exchanges like I mentioned earlier, but they're also going to be, instead of deploying ransomware on your networks, they're going to be using your computing power, your electricity, and those two things combined, they're going to put what's going to be deemed malware, crypto malware. It's really not. It's just a crypto miner that they were able to install because they had access to your network. And instead of deploying ransomware, they're going to deploy these crypto miners. You guys need to become familiar with the cryptocurrency Monero, because Monero is a favorite of cyber criminals because they can use basic components in any computer to mine. They can use graphics cards, they can use CPUs, they can utilize the memory in the system. And any business that has computers online 24/7, servers online 24/7, you are ripe for these guys to look at these and go, I've been on this network for a week now. These 8 computers haven't been rebooted or shut off. I'm going to go put my crypto mining software on these computers. The business is going to see an increase in their electricity bill. But depending on the size of your company, you may or may not notice that increase, or you may chalk it up to just higher energy use. Maybe you're running your heater, your air conditioner more, and you're not equating it to a crypto mining malware attack going on in your network. So this is a way for cyber criminals to do what Randy said, siphon off a little bit at a time. It might be one server might make them 10 cents a day. But 10 cents a day is, I don't know, $3 a month. Is it right? My math right? If I can do that, if I could do that on 100 machines in your network, I'm making $300 a month off your company. Right?
Do it on 1 million machines worldwide, and you're making $3 million.
And I can do things like I can set it to only use up 75% of the resources, so your IT guy doesn't get a call that the system's running slow, or starts looking at your infrastructure saying, oh, this machine's running slow. I got to figure out why. Right? And if I can deploy that at a university, at a school, at multiple schools, at a corporate, data center, I can make hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, depending on how many networks. If I can get into a data center and load my crypto mining software in a data center, oh boy, You know what I mean? And I'll never get caught if I do it correctly. And you'll make a lot of money doing it. So I think 2022, we're going to see an uptick. Ransomware is not going away. But we're going to hear businesses coming out and saying they detected crypto mining malware on their networks. And we're going to hear that more and more. So thoughts?
Well, I think that's a great prediction because you already have theoretically or supposedly millions and millions of computers that are already part of botnets. And if you can just roll out a little bit of something, an EXE or something like that, like you said, it could even crypto mine when the computer's not even in use, which is going to be in most computers is going to be, like 16 hours a day. No one even looks at it or touches it. That stuff could be running in the background doing that. So,
I mean, just think about all the clients that, we know about that the user just clicks Control-Delete and locks the computer and goes home. Right. So, these cyber criminals can write software that says, okay, we know that there's somebody using this computer between 8:30 and 5.
mm-hmm.
So don't run during those hours. But as soon as 5:30 hits, run until 8 o'clock in the morning.
Or run when it's locked.
Right. Or run when it's locked. If the screen's locked, run.
So back in the day, I don't want to get off on too big of a tangent, but back in the day, you had rootkits that would literally clean up the systems.
Yeah.
So they could be running where they wouldn't get caught because your system actually would be better. If you got another virus, it would get rid of it. I bet we'll see a lot of that too, where, your computer actually could run better because they've taken some of those old, tricks from back in the day, and now they're just loading the crypto miner on there. That's a good prediction. I think you're spot on.
Andre, take us home.
So that means that when we do our quarterly reviews with our clients, we now have to ask them for their electricity bill.
Right? Not a bad move, right? Hey, can I see your electricity bill? Was there a reason for this increase? All right. And it bodes well because, right, if you have something like, what we have here where we have like digital thermostats where we can see the usage of each thermostat that we have in place. If that usage on that thermostat doesn't go up, then where's my electricity spend increase coming from, right? Hopefully I don't find out through my electric bill at my company. I think we'll find it well before that, but it's a good point. It's a good, thing. People need to look out for this stuff, and it's very sleuthy, the way that this stuff works and runs and can be programmed to run. So sort of acknowledge Ruben again. He threw in another comment here. So I figure before we end the show, we'll throw up his comment. And he just briefly says, I also think that IT companies should give their clients some form of training with regards to cybersecurity. Almost 80% of attacks is usually from a phishing attempt because almost all non-IT users don't have the needed knowledge.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We talk about all the time on this show, right? Is, employees, if you're not getting cyber awareness training from your employer, go to the proper person at your company and just let them know that there's companies out there that can help you get this stuff. And you want it because you don't want to be the person who causes a ransomware attack at your company and potentially could cause the company to go out of business or people to lose their jobs, including you. So good show, gentlemen. Good job. I love it. I think all these predictions are going to come true, all 9, quite frankly. That's it for me. I'm going to end the show unless you guys have anything for the good of the people. All right. Thanks for your inputs, guys. We'll talk
Stay safe out there.
To everyone next week because we're going to do, Randy, what did we say we were going to do next week?
Going to look into multi-factor
and password managers. We're going to look at them and we're going to show people what they look like. So very, very non-technical for the non-tech person. Very average layman person type stuff that we're going to educate people on. So tell your friends. We'll see you all next week. Take care.